Hello, everyone, and good evening, good morning, good afternoon to all the participants who have joined for today's session. I hope I'm audible to everyone. You can please let me know in the chat if I'm audible to all.
Yeah, you're audible.
Okay, thank you so much. Acknowledgement. So today, we are going to discuss about cross-site scripting, what is XSS, and we are also going to learn XSS techniques that is going to be useful for us for automation when we do bug bounties or when we do pen test. So let's begin. Before we start understanding automation for XSS, for those who have joined and is not aware what exactly XSS. So XSS stands for cross-site scripting. It is a web security vulnerability, which means this issue or this bug is found in web applications majorly, although the same vulnerability can be identified in mobile applications, thick client, thin client, and other software packages as well. Today, we are going to focus and learn about how we can identify cross-site scripting in majority of the web applications that would be having a bug bounty program. You can apply the same technique and principle for identification of this issue in your pen test engagements as well. So how does XSS arise in an application? In this modern world, and when we see this modern web applications, majority of the websites use JavaScript. We know that how a website has been created. So basically, a website is a collection of web pages. Those web pages have HTML into its source code. We all must have studied about HTML in our school or college, and we know what are some of the basic tags that we use in HTML. Now, along with that, a website would also have CSS, which would add colors to the website. Now, modern applications also use JavaScript. JavaScript is used to perform various actions on the application. For example, if a user should redirect after clicking a button, maybe let's say the login button, the user should be redirected to the next step of action that would be either dashboard or profile, or any other action that the developer wants should happen on the client side. That can be created using JavaScript. JavaScript can also be used to create actions on the server side as well. Okay, so we understood modern applications use JavaScript, and when an application is using JavaScript and it is not correctly sanitizing the user supplied input, then the application might potentially be vulnerable to cross-site scripting. Today, we are going to see such application in which when a user supplies a malicious input to the application, how the JavaScript code checks for that input, if it is correctly sanitizing or no. If it is not correctly sanitizing the input, the user might use his supplied input, which will be a JavaScript payload, to create some actions on the application. The action could be a simple action like an alert, or the user can also redirect the victim to a third-party malicious attacker control domain, or the attacker can also steal cookies of the users to perform an account takeover. Now, in the front of your screen, you can see one demonstration figure which explains how a cross-site scripting vulnerability could occur on a web application. So you can see the first step starts from here. This is the attacker. Let's assume that the attacker has discovered a vulnerability into the application that enables script injection. To keep it simple, let's assume the web application have a search field and it's an e-commerce application. On the e-commerce application, the attacker, there's a search functionality wherein he can search for any search query, let's say an e-commerce application selling phones. So once he searches for phone, he is able to see that his search is being reflected on the application. Or when he searched for that phone query or string, it reached to the server and he is then able to see the results based on that. What happens next? If the web application is vulnerable, when the user supplies his script and the server or the application executes that script instead of reflecting that. Now, it's really dangerous if an application executes the user supplied JavaScript. If the user supplied JavaScript gets executed, then the attacker can now execute any other harmful command through JavaScript that he wants. So now let's assume the attacker has injected a payload, which is a JavaScript query, and the application is executing it. Now, this payload is being saved in the application, assuming we have a stored XSS on the website. Let's take an example of the e-commerce application once again, wherein the user or the attacker search for mobile phone. Now the attacker in the feedback or review enters a JavaScript payload. As he knows the application is executing the JavaScript, any website visitor or any other user who visits the website and tries to see that mobile phone reviews, the JavaScript execution will take place. Once it executes, the cookie of the website visitor would be stolen and would be sent to the attacker. Okay, so this is one way of exploiting cross-site scripting for an application which is stored. Similarly, for what we have seen, we have reflected XSS and DOM as well. Okay, so let's see the next type. Next slide, which is type of XSS. You can see over here, there are three types of XSS that generally exist in an application. The first one is known as reflected XSS. The second one is known as stored XSS. And the third one is known as DOM XSS. Now let's understand each one of them one by one. So what is a reflected XSS? In any application, so let's take an example of this application, which is testphp.vulnweb.com. Now, this is an example application, web application for us, wherein we can see the application has multiple functionalities, wherein I can see categories, I can see artists, I can comment on an artist, which opens up an input box here, and there's a comment box over here as well. Your cart, guest book, which allows a comment over here as well. You can see add message, and there is a login functionality on this application as well. Now, as we are discussing about reflected XSS, there are two conditions that should be satisfied on any web application for reflected XSS to happen. So let's understand the two conditions, okay? So the first condition that we are going to see for reflected XSS, the first and the second two conditions should be satisfied, and then we can confirm the application is vulnerable. The first condition is a reflection of input. Any input that we supply in an application, if gets reflected, then we can say there's a possibility of reflected XSS. Although we cannot confirm the application is vulnerable to reflected XSS, but there could be a possibility. So what is the second condition is execution. Okay, so the user supplied input, if gets reflected, and also gets executed. Okay. If it also gets executed, then we can say the application is vulnerable to reflected XSS.